Hey, what's up guys, this is Thunderstruck115, I hope you're having a good day today. Just full of positivity and happiness, dude! Because today, we are going to be taking a look at a video by the Nintendo fanboy known as Harman Smith. So, what exactly is he doing now? Well, apparently, he's calling out people that are hyped for Metroid Prime 4 as being pretendos. And he tries claiming that people are hyping up Metroid Prime 4 to downplay Nintendo's other games, which is quite frankly the stupidest fucking argument I have ever heard regarding Metroid. Now, I can understand not being super duper hyped for this game, considering all we've seen at this point is a logo. We haven't seen any gameplay or cinematics ever since the game was announced back in 2017. Oh my god, it's been 6 years already. But this argument that Harman Smith tries making is completely stupid, so without further ado, let's go ahead and roll the video.
Hello everyone, this is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Crew of Beautiful Rabbit Hole Lore and Frey, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon.
Why do I get the feeling that the kind of books he would write would be gay fanfiction? Well, I guess I'm not really curious enough to go find out for myself.
Has anyone noticed among, like, the YouTube community, the Twitter crowd, like the Twitter influencers, like the influencer community, that the most anticipated game on Switch is not Tears of the Kingdom, the upcoming Zelda game, the sequel to Breath of the Wild, it is Metroid Prime 4.
As much as I would love for that to be the case, considering I am a huge fan of the Metroid series, I highly doubt it. Because the Metroid series has a fairly niche appeal, compared to Zelda, where it appeals to a massive wide audience. I mean, hell, take a look at the sales numbers for any Metroid game and compare them to the sales numbers of the contemporary Zelda game. For example, according to vgsales.fandom.com, the original Metroid on NES sold 2.73 million copies, whereas the original Legend of Zelda on NES sold 7.29 million copies. Super Metroid sold 1.42 million copies, A Link to the Past sold 7.43 million. Metroid Prime 1 sold 2.84 million copies, whereas The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker sold 6.78 million copies. Metroid Prime 2 sold 1.10 million copies, while Twilight Princess sold 10 million copies. Hell, the best-selling game in the series, Metroid Dread, sold 2.9 million copies versus 28.25 million copies for Breath of the Wild. And if we look at the entire franchise, every single sale of every single Metroid game totaled together comes down to 20.19 million copies sold, versus The Legend of Zelda, which has 124.299 million copies sold. Just for their mainline games, by the way, that's not including spin-offs. Whereas in the Metroid numbers, spin-offs such as Metroid Prime Federation Force are included. Just to put it in perspective, Breath of the Wild outsold the entire Metroid series over its entire life. So yeah, something tells me that there are more people excited for Tears of the Kingdom than there are people excited for Metroid Prime 4.
A game we don't know anything about. That's a direct sequel to Metroid Prime 3. You know, cult classic Wii game from the mid 2000s. I love Metroid Prime. I've been playing the games a lot lately. I've been trying to play through like 1 and 2 again. I'd like to get through the entire trilogy before 4 comes out, and I've been putting this off for years. But every time I play Prime, I'm like really taken aback by just how good these games actually are. I am a big fan of Metroid Prime, although I've been more of a fan of like 2D Metroid specifically. Traditionally, I've been a bigger fan of 2D Metroid. I really am getting like an appreciation for what Prime did as like a series, as a side story, as like an IP. I think Prime is like phenomenal.
Not gonna lie, I kind of actually agree with him here. I personally have a preference for the 2D side-scroller games, mainly because of the better pacing, and the fact that I often have more freedom in the 2D games as far as sequence breaking goes, which is actually kind of ironic, come to think of it. But yeah, the Prime games are really fucking good.
honestly. Honestly, I feel like its biggest mistake was probably being a Metroid game, because too many people who love the 2D games are just play Metroid Prime and think that, like, Super is better. Like, I've known a lot of people like that. I myself was like that for a long time, and I've only recently, I think, grown out of it and like started appreciating the game on its own merits. But
I mean, there's nothing wrong with preferring Super over Prime. Hell, I'm still like that. My biggest issue with Prime 1 specifically is the fact that you're backtracking back and forth so much, and what you're backtracking for is so insubstantial that it just kind of fucks with the pacing. But yeah, there's a lot of things I do appreciate about Prime and think that it does better than Super Metroid. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a mistake that it was a Metroid game. I mean, converting it from a 2D side-scroller to a fully 3D game is a bit of a challenge. And I thought they did a pretty damn good job on their first attempt.
I find...
Okay, was it really necessary to do 2 jump cuts? Like, I understand doing a jump cut so that way the video stays on pace, but why 2 of them? It just makes the presentation of the video just feel bad. Like, just edit that first one out.
I don't believe that the people who are talking about Metroid Prime 4 are fans of the Metroid IP. I don't believe they're fans of the first 3 Metroid Prime games. I don't believe they're enthusiasts of Metroid Prime Federation Force.
I mean, can you really blame them for not being an aficionado for Federation Force? People didn't like it because it didn't feel like a Metroid game, because it was just a co-op shooter on the fucking 3DS of all things. And keep in mind, at that point, we hadn't had a Metroid game in over 6 years, and the last one we did have at the time was fucking Other M. But as for the others, the overwhelming majority of people that are excited about Prime 4 are Metroid fans. Sure, maybe there are some people who haven't played a Metroid game before, but it would be a good way for them to get into the series. Well, assuming Nintendo actually releases it in our lifetime. But yeah, the majority of people that are talking about Prime 4 are either Metroid fans that are waiting for the game, or just people memeing the fact that it got revealed over 6 years ago at this point, and we still haven't seen anything else regarding the game.
I don't believe they've played Metroid Prime Pinball. I don't think they've tried Metroid Prime Hunters. The reason why so many game journalists, influencers, and shills are so interested in Metroid Prime 4 is because of Metroid's reputation as a hardcore Nintendo property.
When did Metroid ever have a reputation as a hardcore Nintendo property? More mature? Maybe. I mean, I do think that you need to be older to really enjoy these games more. Not necessarily because of an ESRB rating, but mainly because of the kind of game that it is. But I wouldn't necessarily say that Metroid is a hardcore game in and of itself. I mean, there are certainly hardcore ways to go about it, things like randomizers, sequence breaking, speed running the game, playing Dread mode in Metroid Dread, that sort of thing. But I wouldn't necessarily say the series is hardcore in and of itself.
The reason these people like Metroid is the idea of it. They like the idea of an edgier, more hardcore Nintendo franchise. And even though they don't play or enjoy these games at all, they're still going to hype it up and they're going to hype it up in order to talk down about other Nintendo products. And that's kind of what we've been seeing over the past couple of years, is that, like, every game that actually comes out, stuff like Mario Rabbids, stuff like Triangle Strategy, stuff like ARMS, Breath of the Wild itself to a certain extent, Octopath Traveler, Splatoon 2 and 3, every major Nintendo game that comes out gets shit on in some capacity by these people because it's not edgy enough, it's not hardcore enough, it's not, like, appealing to their tastes.
Yeah, and my advice in dealing with these kinds of people is to just ignore them, because the majority of people aren't really doing that. And if there is anyone that's calling out Nintendo for having family-friendly or cutesy art styles for their games, then I guarantee that person is in the fucking minority, because that's what Nintendo has been known for making for the most part, is family-friendly stuff like that. Sure, occasionally you have games like Metroid or Sin and Punishment which branch out, but those are the exception. No, I'm pretty sure the majority of people who aren't really drawn to Nintendo's more family-friendly stuff will likely just play something else.
Metroid, they feel, has the potential to be like a generic sci-fi first-person shooter franchise, but it's not. Like, that's the thing about this, is that, like, the appeal of Metroid to these people is purely surface level. You know, the reason these people are so enthusiastic about Metroid is because they think it's something that they can use to weaponize against Nintendo products.
You do realize Metroid is a Nintendo product, right? So according to you, they're hyping up a Nintendo product because they want to weaponize it against Nintendo products? Like, that's pretty fucking dumb. If you wanted to weaponize something against Nintendo products, I'd go with something that wasn't made by Nintendo, like God of War, Halo, Devil May Cry, or some other shit like that. Because if anything, while Nintendo's core audience is more into that other, more family-friendly sort of game style, they realize they have customers that would like a sort of product like that. But yeah, you really cannot make this shit up, folks.
Other Nintendo games, you know, like, it is an example of games that, of a franchise they can use to weaponize against Nintendo. It's not necessarily because they're so enthusiastic about the IP, because they clearly aren't. There's nothing to talk about with Metroid Prime 4, actually. It's been like 4 years since it announced. It was canceled once. If anything, that game should have a lot of red flags. But these guys are hyping this game up, saying it's their most anticipated game on the Switch coming out, purely to make other Nintendo games look worse in comparison. Like, forget all the other good Nintendo games that are coming out in the first half of 2023. What I'm really excited for is Metroid Prime 4. A game we haven't seen anything of.
I suppose part of what he's saying is fair, considering that we haven't actually seen anything on Metroid Prime 4 besides a logo at this point. So I guess maybe there are some people overhyping it. But this whole notion that they're doing so specifically to weaponize it against Nintendo is fucking stupid. Maybe they're just hyping it up because they like the Metroid games, they like the previous games in the series, and are interested to see what comes next. Like, I'm excited for Metroid Prime 4. Can't really say I'm hyped, though, because, again, we haven't really seen anything about it, so kind of hard to really get hyped for it that way, but yeah, this whole fucking argument is stupid.
We haven't seen anything about, and, oh yes, these same people didn't really talk about Dread, by the way. That's also really telling that these guys don't care about, like, the new 2D Metroid. And in fact, I saw a lot of bitching about Metroid Dread when it was first unveiled. And now I'm even seeing people saying that, like, it failed or it didn't do very well.
Literally, the only explanation I can think of for this statement is if you were only listening to Griffin Gaming's take on Metroid Dread. Because the discussion about this game was generally positive, so I just had to hit you with that Metacritic user score of 8.6. Sure, there were some flaws with the game, things like areas closing off behind you when you progress, or the endgame item hunt, or the fact that the bosses can be massive difficulty spikes that's unbefitting of a Metroid game, but for the most part, people's response to this was positive. So, if you're going to claim that there was a lot of people claiming that this game failed, could you please provide some examples?
When it sold like 3 times more than Super did, like, anyone who says, like, Dread failed is delusional. I feel like there is this very, very real tendency among game journalists to pretend they have a lot more credibility than they actually do. I think Bayonetta 3 is a really good example of that, in which, like, people were enthusiastic about the property at first because they thought it was a strong female lesbian, like, going up against, like, religious stereotypes, but it's not.
Well, there's the problem. You're taking games journalists seriously when they've been a joke for over a decade at this point.
You know, like, they convinced themselves of a certain narrative in regard to the character and the idea of Bayonetta, but when the game actually came out, when it actually had, like, limitations, when it actually came to, like, what the game actually was, these people immediately turned on it, and very quickly. Like, it's bizarre to see, like, these self-processed, like, huge Bayonetta fans, people like the Super Best Friends, people like, the Gaming Grit Show, people like that, like, not know anything about the lore, not know anything about the characters, not know anything about the gameplay, like, try to do everything in their power to downplay everything that 3, and especially 2 did. To downplay, like, everything that 3 and 2 did. Like, in regards to the character, in regards to the world building, and in regards to, like, the development cycle of the games. Like, there are things you can talk about when it comes to, like, the Bayonetta sequels that aren't as good as the original. Like, I'm not even sure I disagree with that, but you can tell there's a very big difference between someone like me talking about, like, how like, the combat in Bayonetta 2 feels jank, versus, like, Wooly and Pat, like, screaming about how Bayonetta was, like, always in love with Jean, like, that was how like, Luca is, like, the annoying side character that no one likes, like, trying to push this narrative that obviously wasn't true.
Okay, now admittedly, I haven't played a Bayonetta game before, so correct me if I'm wrong. But from what I remember of Bayonetta 3's launch, it was generally positive. The only real part that I heard people complaining about were the graphics and performance. Which, after watching the Digital Foundry video on the game, makes perfect sense why people were complaining about it, because from what I understand about Bayonetta, it's basically a clone of Devil May Cry, and a really damn good one at that. So having serious frame drops in the middle of combat would be a huge problem. But in terms of the actual gameplay, I heard nothing but good things about it. Again, if anybody here watching this that's a Bayonetta fan is hearing to get something incorrect, feel free to correct me. But I thought the reception on this game was generally positive besides the issues with performance.
That is, like, my feeling on this. I think Metroid has, like, the same kind of audience that that Bayonetta 3 has, in that it has this dedicated hangers-on, like, demographic who are fans of the franchise purely to give themselves credibility, to purely make themselves seem cool and hardcore, but when it actually comes out, when the game actually, like, releases and they actually have to play it, you'll see these people fall off very, very, very quickly. And that's exactly what happened with Bayonetta 3. When this game actually came out, all these plebs, all these people who presented themselves as huge Bayonetta fans, they exposed themselves as being complete casuals who didn't know anything. And I think Prime 4 is going to be the same way. I do have optimism that the game is going to be good. I am excited for it to a certain capacity, but, like, it's not going to make my most anticipated list because we haven't seen anything from it. Like, it's possible that, like, the SJWs have completely gotten control of it and they've, like, turned Samus into, like, a troon or whatever.
Turned Samus into a troon? Like, what the fuck does that even mean? Alright, so I looked it up. Apparently troon is like a slur against transgender women or something. And to that I say, I highly doubt that they're gonna turn Samus transgender or whatever, considering that Nintendo doesn't really listen to the kinds of people that bitch about that sort of thing. So come on, Harman Smith, you've got nothing to worry about.
And like, ruin the entire IP. It's possible, right? Like, I don't think it's likely, but it's possible that happened. I think more and more that YouTube, I've been saying this for years, YouTubers and gaming culture is more often revolves around upcoming products that nobody has actually played yet, as opposed to, like, talking about, like, established, long-standing classics. Like, it feels like it's just a never-ending hype cycle for these people, where they just, like, where a product comes out and they forget about it and move on to the next product. And I've been speaking out against this for years now, but it's getting worse. I feel like it feels like it's not even like a week or day one where there's some kind of controversy arising regarding these games and what they're trying to accomplish and stuff like that.
That's because modern AAA games have just been getting shittier and shittier by the year. Like games like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, they were bashed because they were legitimately unplayable at launch due to all the issues it had. Or Halo Infinite, a live service without the live service. Or Gran Turismo 7, which required an online connection for a single-player game, and then the servers went down. Shit like that is why there's a lot of controversies regarding video games when they launch, because that's when it gets into the hands of consumers, and they realize that, oh hey, we got sold a busted product. But like Metroid Dread, there wasn't a controversy when it launched because it was an actual quality game.
I'm curious what the backlash to Prime 4 is going to be. Because for the long time, like, the complaint among fans was not like, oh, we haven't gotten a new Metroid game. When would we ever get one? It's never going to happen. And then when it actually comes out, when Dread actually gets announced and then released, nobody cares. You know, Dread does well, there's nothing wrong with that, but like the people who were like very adamant like about like wanting a new 2D Metroid game, a lot of those people are nowhere to be found.
Probably because they're playing the game. Like you said, we just got a new 2D Metroid in the form of Dread. So if we were bitching that we never got a new 2D Metroid game in a long time, that would be a stupid complaint because we got one with the Metroid Dread.
Like post-Dread release. Like, what do they think of Dread? What are their opinions on it? How does it hold up? I don't even know how these people feel about Dread. Like, I don't think these people have played it more than once, honestly. Like, I've started like 3 playthroughs, but I've only finished one. I really do need to get back and play more Dread. But like, I enjoy Dread. Regardless of whether I think it's like better than Zero Mission, Samus Return, Super Fusion, like regardless of what I think of Dread, I still enjoy it. And I think that's the only thing that really matters, is like how much you enjoy a property.
Well, considering the game has an 8.6 user score on Metacritic, I'd say that most people enjoy the game. And what makes you think that they're only playing it once? It's a Metroid game. A lot of the appeal of it is the replayability. Hell, 4 months after the game launched, they added Dread mode, which you unlock by beating Hard mode. Now, why would they do that if nobody would play the game more than once? Because, again, it's not like this game has the mass appeal of something like Mario, Zelda, or Pokemon.
And I think more and more gaming YouTubers, like the shills, the influencers, they don't actually enjoy video games. All they're trying to do is to manipulate you into believing nonsense that simply is not true.
Talk about the pot calling the kettle black, but anyways, just like that, his video is over. So the key takeaway here is Harman thinks that everybody excited for Metroid Prime 4 are fake fans that want to weaponize the game against Nintendo, which is just blatantly false. Most of the people excited for this game are Metroid fans, and most of the people that are hating on Prime 4 aren't really so much hating as much as just memeing the fact that it was announced over 5 years ago, and we still haven't seen anything on the game. But yeah, anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for more, and tell me what you think about Harman Smith being a Nintendo fanboy. Also, if you've never played Metroid Dread, I'd highly recommend it. It's a great game. Anyways, that's it. Peace!